Oh, a warm good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we welcome you all to the Medical Device Governance Program webinar series. Just to inform that this afternoon's webinar is a repeat of this morning's webinar held at 10:30 this morning. So if you did attend this morning, you'll only be hearing a repeat of what we did. You're certainly more than welcome to stay though. So again, thanks for joining us this afternoon. We will make a start now that it's on 2:30. I'd like to again welcome you all to the Medical Device Governance Program webinar series. By way of introduction, my name's Anthony Altier and I'm the Program Lead for the New South Wales Medical Device Governance Program at the Clinical Excellence Commission. And it is my great pleasure to co-present to you this afternoon on the medical device reforms from the TGA. This afternoon's webinar will be an introductory webinar to the reforms, and we'll be progressing through those reforms with additional webinars in the future that we'll let you know about shortly. I want to start by acknowledging the country that I'm on today. Today I'm talking to you from Gamaragal land at One Reserve Road, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'd like to further extend that respect to all Aboriginal people who are joining us here this afternoon. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the nitty-gritty of the webinar this afternoon. We're going to try and keep as close to time with 30 minutes allocated, and the webinar is being recorded should you wish to share this information with your networks, or should you wish to review it later on in your own time. We've disabled all participant audio and video, but the chat section of Teams is live, so please feel free to use that chat feature, and you can send us through any questions, comments, any thoughts or input that you may have at any time throughout the webinar. And we've also popped our email address up there for you, so you can certainly you're certainly welcome to directly email us as well. I need to point out that we'll be sharing a lived experience story with you this afternoon, and I should note that these stories have a potential to trigger an experience for some people. And if this does occur for you, then we urge you to please seek some options of support, whether that be through EAP or through your own support networks directly. So I'd now like to move on and introduce the team that's going to be co-presenting with me this afternoon. So we have online the Medical Device Governance Team's project officers in Tanya Arnott, Dr. Ambika Murthy, and Michael Marquet, Mick. I also want to acknowledge with great thanks our Business Support Officer, Zioli Nadvayas, and our Change Manager and Systems Integration Lead, Danielle Murphy, who have been instrumental in getting this webinar series up and running and have been working very hard in the background to make things happen for us. So I really want to acknowledge all the staff that have been involved with this. So let's make a start. What you're seeing on your screen there at the moment is an overview of the topics that we're going to touch upon today. As I've said, this is just an introductory session to the TGA reforms, and we're going to explicitly trying to break those down into what the reforms mean for the New South Wales health system. So we're going to talk about, we're going to give you an overview of medical devices. We'll give you an overview of what actually led to the reforms at a Commonwealth level, and what the impact of those reforms are going to be within state health systems. And we'll certainly also touch on the point of the benefit of these reforms to patient safety. So while I talk about patients, I'd like to acknowledge the work that's gone into the program so far, not just by our consumers and people that have put all their lived experience and perspectives into the development of the reforms at a Commonwealth level, but who have also assisted us with the development of this program at a state level. So this afternoon, as we move along, I'm going to appreciate and recognise consumers, patients, carers, supporters and their loved ones, and the voices of people with lived experience. And here we're really remembering how powerful those voices are. It's their contribution, we know, that is vital to enabling decision-making for health system changes. So in recognition of people with lived experiences of medical devices, Tanya's actually going to take us into the first part of this presentation. So Tanya will provide us with an overview of the reasons why and how the reforms came into being. So Tanya, if you're ready to go, I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you all joining with us online this afternoon. So just to start the session off, I'm going to talk about what prompted the medical device reforms. So the catalysts that prompted the medical device reforms are the countless number of women around the world who in the last 2 decades had their lives destroyed by an implantable medical device called transvaginal mesh. And the mesh was used to prevent pelvic organ prolapse and urinary incontinence. But for many women, it also caused unwanted complications like debilitating pain, nerve damage, infection. And these all significantly affected their lives. And to the extreme, it led to suicide. So my words alone cannot express the emotional toll or the pain or the trauma that these women suffered. It's only through the power of the woman's own story, in their own words, that really brings out the pure meaning of what mattered to them and also the purpose of why we're here today. So with this, I invite you to watch and reflect on a story by the BBC from 2018. It's from a woman in Britain, though it resonates with many stories shared from women across Australia who had transvaginal mesh. So we're just going to share this video with you now.
My husband has turned into my carer, and he's so much less of my husband. We can't have sex. We haven't had sex for 4.5 years. I began to have what felt like period pains, but very intense period pains that would go on for days and weeks and weeks. I had a full abdominal hysterectomy to try and rectify my pain, and of course I still had it there after that. So I lost my womb for no reason.
Can I ask, did you have any suicidal thoughts? You did?
Yeah.
Gosh.
I planned it. I mapped it out. And, you know, having children, something I think just kicked in. I'm very lucky that something kicked in. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are mesh injured women that have taken their own lives and didn't know what the problem was.
That's a very powerful, if not short, video, and very, very provoking. Tanya, thank you for sharing that. Again, I'd like to point out that may have been triggering for some of you, and if it has, please reach out to somebody in your network for support. It's certainly very clear in that video that there was a devastating impact on a large number of women, not just in the UK, but certainly also here in Australia. So, Tanya, are you able to tell us exactly the extent of this issue in Australia?
Yeah, thank you. And that's a very good question. So in Australia alone, it's unclear as to how many women had a mesh implant or how many people experience or how many women actually experience complications. So we're never going to know the exact number of women affected because there wasn't any consistent guidelines on how to document or how to manage medical devices on such a large scale as this.
Okay, thank you. I guess what is clear though is that it's through the voices and the stories shared by these women that have actually led us here to these medical device reforms. So from here, then we can work together to improve the systems that we have in place and ensure that we provide a safe and effective care for people who need a medical device. Thanks for that, Tanya. We might move on now, if you don't mind. Can you tell us how the actual reforms came into be? Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, thanks. So just to give you a picture of how the medical device reforms came to be, I'm just going to take you on a brief journey. So to begin with, I'll talk about how medical devices touch our daily lives. So from the time that we were born, medical devices have been a part of our everyday healthcare. From contact lenses to X-ray machines, even band-aids, These all make up the tens of thousands of diverse medical products used to detect, prevent and treat medical issues. So therefore, it's really essential that medical devices perform optimally for us all. And with this, a new set of mandatory reforms are being implemented across Australia to further safeguard the patients that we care for. So we talked about transvaginal mesh being an implantable medical device earlier with the patient's story. So like artificial joints, cochlear implants and pacemakers. Implantable medical devices are introduced into the body by surgical or medical intervention, and they remain in the body after the procedure.
I might just add at this point, Tanya, as well, for everybody online, that any medical device that's used in Australia has to be approved by the TGA, by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and it has to be included on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, the ARTG, before the device can actually be supplied or used in Australia. Tanya, can you tell us now what actually led New South Wales Health to the reform pathway? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. So most patients with an implantable medical device will never have a problem. But there are some cases in which a medical device has caused harm or unexpected health issues. And when this happens, locating, identifying and promptly notifying affected patients is of paramount importance. And as I said before, many women's lives were destroyed by just one piece of transvaginal mesh. And some women may even be unaware of the recall even to this day. And in recent years, New South Wales Health has been required to respond to a number of medical device issues that have put patient safety at risk. And as a result, safety alert broadcast system notices have been published to notify staff of the emerging risk. And there was an example of this in 2018 where the Clinical Excellence Commission was alerted to an incident where a patient's inferior vena cava filter failed. And this had to be removed. And when it was removed, it was found that the device had fragmented. So if you're not familiar with an inferior vena cava filter, as you see on the screen, it's a small device inserted into the large vein called the inferior vena cava. And this carries the blood from your torso and lower body through the heart into the lungs. And the filter stops blood clots moving into the lungs, where the clot can block an artery and damage the lung, and it can be potentially life-threatening. So patients with the filter had to have it removed. And though like the transvaginal mesh, there wasn't a device register to look up or count how many patients had had the device.
Actually, you're absolutely right. And I remember that inferior vena cava recall very, very well. And I do agree, have there been consistent guidelines or a register of these devices in place, it would have enabled these patients and their clinicians to have been contacted a lot more quickly to inform them of the risks that these implants posed and also to determine the most appropriate course of action for the individual patient. So before we move on, I'd again like to encourage everybody online to send your comments, any questions or thoughts into the chat, or again through to our email, which will come up into the chat box for you. We're going to collate all the questions and send you back those responses via email so that we're not taking too much time up in this webinar. But please also feel free, we'll also address any questions that are coming up in future webinars. So now that we've talked a little bit how the reforms came to be and the journey that led New South Wales Health to those reforms, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Ambika Murthy. And Ambika is going to walk us through the next part of this presentation, which is a basic introduction to the medical device reforms. So Ambika, is there anything else that happened on a national level that you can shed some light on that led to the development of the reforms for us?
Sure, thank you, Anthony. From the 2017 Australian Government Senate inquiry into transvaginal mesh implants came 13 recommendations made to improve the regulation of medical devices. Based on the Senate inquiry recommendations, the Australian Government's Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, whose role is to regulate medical devices and monitor their performance at the national level, devised a set of medical device reforms. With these reforms, the TGA imposed new responsibilities, some of which are mandatory, on health professionals and health services.
So just a bit more to that as well. One of the recommendations that came out of that Senate inquiry and therefore led to the reforms is the need to reclassify certain types of medical devices. So, Ambika, can you talk a little bit more about that for us, please?
Sure, thank you, Anthony. Under the reforms, the TGA has refined the classification of some medical devices which aligns to the potential risk to patients. Devices are classified by considering a number of different questions, such as what does the manufacturer intend the medical device to be used for? How invasive will it be in the body? Example, is it a bandage to be placed on the skin or a catheter to be inserted into the body? Where on or in the body will it be used? How long will it be used for? The pyramid you see on the screen is a graphic illustration that we have borrowed from the Danish Medicines Agency. It is a good depiction of the risk-based classification of medical devices, with class 1 at the bottom of the pyramid being low risk and class 3 at the top of the pyramid being high risk. In the next webinar, we will do a deeper dive on the reclassification of certain medical devices. But in the meantime, particularly if your role requires you to implant medical devices into patients, we highly recommend that you explore the resources available on our Medical Device Governance Program website. New resources are uploaded as they are developed. So please come back to access new resources and subscribe for our future updates.
Thanks for that, Ambika. So looking at the reforms then on a national level, can you tell us a little bit about how they're being implemented?
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. The Australian government TGA reforms make up 3 key strategies. The 3 strategies are, firstly, improve how new devices get on the market. Secondly, strengthen the monitoring and follow-up of devices already in use. Finally, provide more information to patients about the devices they use. At a state level, for New South Wales Health, the CEC's Medical Device Governance Program is aligned with the TGA's reform strategies.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Ambika. As Ambika mentioned, the medical device reforms are grouped underneath those 3 strategies, but what needs to be appreciated is that each of those strategies has several associated action plans. Again, something that needs to be appreciated is that not all of those action plans will be applicable to healthcare settings, because some of the reforms are only applicable to industry and for mass manufacturers, for example. So, Ambika, can you talk to us a little bit more about what is applicable specifically for healthcare?
Sure, thank you, Anthony. Appreciating this is a busy slide, however, it is important for our clinicians and staff. On your screen is the list of reforms that are applicable to healthcare. These are regulation of low-risk medical devices, that's class 1, management of high-risk implantable devices, including informed consent, personalized medical devices, point-of-care manufacturing, reclassification of certain medical devices, software as a medical device, reclassification of surgical meshes, establishment of a unique device identifier, UDI, system and requirements, mandatory reporting of adverse events involving medical devices, including informing patients how to report, implementation of consumer or patient information material requirements. We understand that this may seem like a big list. In future webinars, we will go through each of these to help you understand what each reforms means and their relevance to certain department or setting in a healthcare facility or organization. To view the TGA reforms, please scan the QR code on your screen.
Thanks for that, Ambika. So I think what you've demonstrated quite clearly is that there is indeed a level of complexity in both understanding and implementing the reforms. So thank you for taking us through that. What I want to do now is welcome Mick, and Mick will talk to us about the work that the CEC has undertaken to introduce the reforms to New South Wales Health. He'll also talk a little bit about how the reforms will affect you as a health professional, as well as any patients or consumers that we have online with us this afternoon. So moving on to Mick, my first question to you, Mick, is what's the CEC done to date to transition those TGA reforms into New South Wales Health?
Thanks, Anne. So the CEC is the lead agency supporting safety and quality improvement across the New South Wales health system. What the CEC has done to respond to the TGA reform requirements for New South Wales Health has been multifaceted, such as, firstly, through Program Governance Advisory and New South Wales Policy Review to embed the reform strategies. And secondly, we are also exploring health system needs. Now, this has been achievable through on-site visits, health professional and consumer surveys, as well as collaborating and partnering with the TGA, with the Ministry of Health, with the Agency for Clinical Innovation, HealthShare New South Wales, eHealth New South Wales. We also have health infrastructure, the local health districts, and specialty health networks. Now from this, we've been responsive to system, patient, and health professional needs. We're also focused on reviewing what's already working well in the system and building on that. One example is with the upcoming eHealth Single Digital Patient Record, or SDPR, where we are collaborating with eHealth to incorporate the TGA reform requirements into the new patient medical record system. Another example is HealthShare and eHealth collaboration on the introduction of Smart Chain, which is a digital procurement and supply chain system. We've also developed a communication resource base for health professionals, patients, and carers. The resource base is intended to raise awareness and understanding of the reform strategies and what health professional, patients, and consumers need to know as well. Now, towards the end of this presentation, we will take you through the links to the communication resources that I've just mentioned there.
Excellent, we certainly will. Thanks for that, Mick. So now can we talk about the implications to New South Wales Health? So we've acknowledged that the reforms are pretty intricate and in-depth, but what impact would they have on New South Wales as a health system? And what do they mean for healthcare professionals and for our patients and for individuals? Can you elaborate on that for us a bit, Mick?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll first talk about what the medical device reforms mean for healthcare workers. The overall aim of the TGA medical device reforms is to strengthen the regulation of medical devices in Australia, and the impact of this will safeguard end users of medical devices from injury and harm, and also improve patient safety outcomes. In embedding the reforms into local safety and quality processes, clinicians need to be aware and understand the responsibilities. They also need to comply with the reforms and also help navigate better outcomes for patients.
That's a great snapshot. Thank you, Mick. So that's a really good snapshot of what it means for our frontline workers. So I'd be correct then to say that this may mean potential modifications of work processes?
Yes, that's exactly right. So now for some teams, things are already in place to respond to the reforms. And though for other teams, they may require review of their existing ways of working. For example, part of the reforms is point of care manufacturing, where new responsibilities are being introduced. And this is something that we will talk about in future webinars as well. Now, this implies that guidelines and policies may need to be developed or refined, and this may affect how healthcare staff work.
Wonderful, thank you, Mick. Thanks for touching on the point of both point of care manufacturing and the need for guideline and policy review and development. That's one of the aspects of the reforms that we've been looking at to try and work into our systems. I'd also like to add that another aspect of the reforms is the introduction of a global coding standard that will be called, or that is rather called, the Unique Device Identifier, the UDI. And there are also guidelines under development for point of care manufacturing and for personalised medical devices. And as Mick said, we'll touch on those in future webinars. But the aim and the goal of these aspects are to introduce and to improve the identification, the management, the tracking and tracing of medical devices and where they may sit anywhere within our supply chain, within the system. So Mick, you've talked about what the reforms would mean for our staff. Could we move on to patients? What do the reforms mean for our patients, for our consumers?
Okay, so under these reforms, patients must be given information about their implantable medical device by a healthcare professional. The patient information materials consist of the patient information leaflets, which are also called pills, and this includes information about the device, its risks and benefits, and also alternative device options, for example. And where possible, this should be given to the patients before their procedure to help them decide what is the best device for them. There are also patient implant cards, which are also called PICs, and these include information specific to the device implanted, so the patient can then show this to everyone involved in their continuing care. PICs should be given to the patient after their procedure and prior to discharge. The patient information assists patients to understand the device being implanted, to also have informed consent conversations with the health professional, and supports self-reporting to the TGA if they have any concerns linked to the implantable device. Now, once the TGA investigates the report, and if the medical device is found faulty, then swift action can be taken to locate and remove these devices from the hospital shelves, and also quickly identify and notify other patients that may also be affected. Now, we will discuss patient information and reporting in more detail in our future webinars. In the meantime, though, please see the link on your screen and in the post, and just letting you know that this is an online form for clinicians, patients, and their relatives to report medical device-related issues to the TGA.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Mick. I think a really important aspect of these reforms and part of our obligations as healthcare professionals is that we do provide the right information to patients at the right time. And I think it's of high import that patients and consumers are now being more empowered to better understand their medical devices and to report any issues that they may have that are related to those medical devices. So to wrap up, the key takeaway message here today is that the purpose of the TGA's medical device reforms, which apply to New South Wales Health, is to provide a solid base to strengthen safer systems of care for patients who have a medical device, whether that be an implantable medical device or whether that be a CPAP machine that we give a patient to take home with them. The overall goal here is to ensure that the reforms are well understood by our clinicians and our frontline workers, and that the clinicians can easily apply the regulations and be compliant with the regulations within their relevant settings amidst their existing workloads. And for patients and consumers, this is about ensuring that you receive information about whatever type of medical device is being used on you, whether it's an implantable device, as I said, or whether it's a CPAP machine that you're given to take home, and that they understand, or that you understand ways to report any issues or concerns that you have with that medical device. So before we end this afternoon, we invite you to visit our website again. You'll see the link there on your screen, and you can learn a little bit more about the reforms there. You'll see the yellow subscribe button on the top right-hand corner of that screen, and you can enter your details there, and we'll keep you informed of both future webinar dates and updates to the program as we progress. Please also keep your eyes open, as we're always making updates to the site with new content, and we'll be certainly adding some frequently asked questions to that content very shortly. We certainly also very highly welcome webinar feedback, and there'll be a feedback form. I can see the link's already been dropped there. Thank you, Danny, for the feedback form. So please complete that feedback form for us, and any questions again or thoughts or any input that you have for us, again, please feel free to pop into the chat or email to us directly. And that email link will come up into the chat in one moment. Lastly, but not least, I'd like to mention our next two upcoming webinars. So on the 10th of April, we have a webinar on point of care manufacturing, and this will include some information on personalised medical devices, point of care manufacturing, custom-made medical devices, and 3D printing. And that'll be followed on the 1st of May by a webinar on the introduction of the unique device identifier. Like today, they will both occur at 11 a.m. and repeated at 2:30 in the afternoon. And again, like today, those sessions will be recorded so that they're readily accessible for you and for you to share with your networks. So we'll just post a QR code there in the chat, and that, I can see they've already been posted, and those links and those QR codes will take you to registration pages for those webinars. Finally, before I end, I really want to thank you all massively for joining us this afternoon, despite your busy schedules. We really do appreciate you coming along this afternoon. We very much value your presence at the session. And again, any insight, thoughts, or input or questions that you may have, please keep them coming. So for now, I will say goodbye, and everybody have a lovely and safe afternoon.